down his eyes, and I told him, I said, you know what, you don't have to worry. As long as I've got teeth, I'm going to fight that thing, and when my teeth are gone, I'm going to gun it until I can't do it anymore. Amen. Do you really think that Jesus, John said he did this miracle to show forth his glory? Do you think that the first miracle Jesus would have done would be to just provide a bunch of alcohol for people to get intoxicated? That's beyond my comprehension. I say let's keep the pure, holy gospel of Jesus. What really happened at Cana of Galilee was a couple facing a critical moment of disappointment, but Jesus came on the scene. Yes. And he answered with a glorious miracle that began to tell us who he is. Now the second sign also happened in Cana of Galilee. You read about it in chapter 4. A nobleman comes to Jesus. And when he does, he is requesting prayer because his son is sick. His son is ill. And at first he says, he beseeches the Lord that he would do this. And Jesus answers him and said, you won't believe unless you see this great sign and this great miracle. But the man persists, and Jesus begins to perceive that here's a man that has real faith. He's not a Jewish man. He's a centurion. He's an official, a nobleman. But he is someone that Jesus is getting ready to do something for. And I love the dialogue and the exchange, because the man says to him, he says, Jesus, you come with me. You come to my house and heal my son. Maybe he heard about the water in the wine. He's heard about Jesus. And he says, you come with me. And I love Jesus' immediate answer. When the man said, you come, Jesus says, no, you go. Okay. He sent him back. How many of you know we don't tell him what to do? He tells us what to do. God is not up in heaven to wait on us hand and foot. You and I are on this earth to serve and to glorify him. Somebody said you can't put God in a box. I know we can't put him in a box, but we must keep him in his book. We keep him in the Word. He only operates according to his Word, and he's sovereign, and we're the servants. But here's a man that used to tell people where to go and what to do, and they jump in and they obey. And he says, you come with me. And Jesus said, no, you go. But he said, your son is healed. And Jesus, here's the problem here is a problem of distance. And that was a problem maybe we had represented around the altar during the prayer time. Because sometimes it's easy if we sense the immediate presence of God for us to believe by faith. But how many of you know it's a different situation when there's a great distance involved? But Jesus just spoke the word, and the man later returned home the next day. And when he got home, the boy was healed. And he inquired, what time did the healing come? And when they told him, it was the same exact time that Jesus had spoken to him. Disappointments is no problem for this Jesus I'm preaching about. Distance is no problem for this Jesus. Now the third miracle happened by a pool of water called at Bethesda, called the place of mercy, in John chapter 5. You remember that scene, don't you? It's where they laid all the sick folks, many of them paralyzed and had great diseases. This particular man had been there 38 years. And we read that once a year the waters were troubled, and whoever got in first got in the pool. Now, I know that we've heard preach that a lot, and I've probably through the years preached it myself, and it makes for good preaching when we think about, you know, the time to move is when the water stirred and get in. But I'm not really sure that's what's going on there. That fourth verse is kind of an interesting phenomenon. If anybody has an NIV Bible, the fourth verse isn't even there. It's not even, you got to find it in there's a footnote down at the bottom. I was mischievous as a professor. I'd tell the students sometimes, I'd say, who'll read for me in class? Who has an NIV? Several hands raised up, and I'd say, read John 5 and 4. And they say, okay, and they get there, and it's not even there. It's not even there. And I say, go ahead and read it. They say, well, it's not there. And what happens is that verse wasn't in many of the early manuscripts, and so the NIV puts it as a footnote. What's that verse say? I don't want anybody to get, alarmed here. That verse is the verse that talks about the angel coming down and stirring the waters. Now, if that verse is authentic, which many of us believe that it would be, it's in many manuscripts, but I'm convinced, I really don't think that it was God that came down and stirred the water. I really don't. I think something would happen at different times in the water, and people would see that, and some would think that's an angel of God. You say, why don't you think that was God that did it? Because to me, that's contrary to the revelation of God we have in both Testaments. The fact that He would only do it once a year, and you had to be the first one to get in. And if you weren't first, you didn't get in at all. How many of you know that's opposite of everything that God reveals to us about Himself? Well, I read in the Old and the New Testament, He's come for the lost and the last and the least. You don't have to be best or first. You don't have to beat anybody else. You can come in. But something would happen in the water, and somebody would try to... But there was one man, there was no way he could get in the water. He's been lame for 38 years. But Jesus said, will you be made whole? And the man said, I don't have anybody to help me in the water. He's got faith in the water, but what he needs to know is not the water that he needs. He's standing in the immediate, his immediate presence. He's standing the Son of the living God. And Jesus says to him, take up your bed, you are whole. And he administers healing to him, and later on finds him and makes him completely whole. Here's a man with a great disability. Here's a man that doesn't have the ability to help himself. But Jesus is his answer for his disability. The fourth sign miracle is when you turn the page to chapter 6, and now you got a huge crowd. You preachers think you've got troubles. How about this dilemma? You got a crowd like you've never had on homecoming. 5,000 men, besides women and children. If you give all of those men 2.4 children and one wife, that's over 20,000 people. Now that'd be a wonderful crowd to have. But what if you wanted to feed them? And they were getting hungry. And there's nothing to eat. But Andrew says there's a little lad here. And what does he have? He's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Somebody said it's 5 barley loaves and 2 sardines. That's about what it is. It doesn't look like much. And someone said, what are these few among so many? Anybody ever feel that way about your Wednesday night or your Sunday night crowd? What are these so few among so many? But how many of you know little is much when God gives it? And Jesus takes it and He blesses it. And you got a dilemma, but there's a dilemma solving Jesus in the midst. And He multiplies the loaves and fishes. And when they get through feeding that crowd, they all have eaten, and there is 12 baskets of the fragments that is remaining. After that event, they wanted to make Jesus king, but He went into a mountain to be alone in communication with the Father. But He put His followers in a boat and sent them out sailing over Galilee. And as our brother wonderfully sang about during that occasion, that night, in the early hours of the night, the storm began to beat against the bow of the ship. And they were filled with great sorrow and fear and great despair. But all of a sudden they looked up, and here came Jesus. And He was walking out upon the water, saying, be of good cheer, be not afraid. It is I, it is I. Amen. What did He say? I'm no ghost. Amen. It is I. And immediately they were on dry land. Do you understand? He could see them from the mountain. He was higher than the storm. He was the one that put them in the boat. He was the one, you know, that sometimes it's the Lord that puts us in the ship that sails right into the middle of the storm. But Jesus is the answer for human despair. The 6th sign miracle is in John 9. And you have a man, as the disciples and Jesus pass by, who cannot see. He's blind. And the question is asked, why is he in this condition? Who sinned? Neither he nor his parents. And Jesus answers, neither one. That was the Hebrew mindset. Somebody had to sin. If there's suffering, there has to be personal sin. That's the reason for it. Jesus said, no, He's that way that the works of God might be made manifest in Him. And Jesus announced, I am the light of the world. And He announced that He has come to earth at such a time even as this. And He reaches down in the ground, He makes a clay and a spittle, and He puts it in the man's eyes, and tells him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. You say, why did He do it? My answer is, I don't know why Jesus did it that way. All I know